Sage, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm absolutely honoured. I love Browngirl and also used to work with you as well.
Yeah,
so we know
my team, one of the very talented writers.
And we definitely used to explore some of the most controversial topics on discussion. Yeah. And I brought you on today because one of the topics of discussion that I'm having at the moment is to do with my mixed race children. I'm in an interracial relationship, and some of the sort of conversations I'm having are conversations I actually never thought I'd ever have. One of them being what religion I'd be bringing up my children. So on the surface, it's just a kind of question exploring sort of my opinion. But, you know, I found it quite bizarre that when I went to answer it, it was, you know, well, the best of both, because that's what they are.
Yeah.
And people find that very strange. Like, you're either one or the other.
One or the other, absolutely, yeah.
So as Browngirl Magazine editor, are you having conversations like this? Because also you're mixed as well.
I am, yeah.
So how does that resonate with you?
I always find that quite uncomfortable, although I am of Indian heritage. My dad is Punjabi and my mum is Gujarati. And, you know, nowadays to the outside world, it doesn't really seem any different. People say, oh, you're from India, it's all the same. And I didn't really, I kind of came, when we were all born here, I've always had a massive influence from my mum's side of the family. So I'm more versed in my mother tongue, which is Gujarati.
Right.
And I've always been very close to my Hindu culture because of my grandmother and all of my surrounding family members as well. It just so happened that my dad's family predominantly live in India.
Right.
But that's not to say that whenever we go back to India, we still have like really good relations with them. We speak their language as well. So, you know, Hindi is like the common language in both houses anyway. So to be honest, as children, I never really felt that I was half of anything.
Okay.
Because as a child, nobody really ever asked me that. I grew up in a town where there were so many different cultures, and there was a massive, and there still is, a massive Gujarati community. So it was only, I think it only really started to sink in when I went to university. And the university that I went to, there was a massive Sikh community.
Right.
And I remember they had a Hindu association and a Sikh association.
Right, okay.
And I was quite curious because my group of friends were very mixed. My best friend was Sri Lankan, I had a lot of black friends, and I wanted to take an interest. And then, you know, for me, unfortunately, I felt quite isolated because I didn't feel like I fitted into either one.
Yeah.
There was a clear segregation there, and I dated Punjabi guys as well throughout, you know, university, and that's when my Sikh culture and my heritage questions were asked around that time, as to like, well, what caste are you, and where, you know,
very political,
very kind
for
of,
a date.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And the thing is, it almost felt quite, from my mum's side, I was more familiar with it, but that was natural because I was surrounded by so many of my mum's family members. So you don't feel like you're really missing out on anything. And some of my Punjabi friends were like, well, you can't even speak Punjabi.
Yeah, so it was determining you saying, so if you sort of picking one or saying you're mixed.
Yeah.
People needed to determine what you were, what one you chose, to determine what, if you were going to fit in with them, if you're going to be friends.
It basically was a deal breaker, you know, in a couple of relationships. And, you know, I remember having this conversation with my dad, and I must have been about like 21. And I said to my dad, I asked him, I was like, what caste are we? And he kind of looked at me, because, you know, he's not exactly very
practicing.
No, he's not practicing Sikh. You know, he believes in his religion. He's respectful of his religion. He's always taken us to the Gurdwara, and he's tried to educate us as much as possible, so that we don't feel, you know, left out. And you know, you want to retain some of that side as well.
It's part of you, isn't it?
It is part of me. It's part of my heritage, absolutely. And he asked me, why are you asking this question? You know, and I explained the situation. And he said to me, look, you know, I've never really questioned you. But he said that, you know, if somebody's going to start asking these questions now to determine whether you fit in, and this doesn't really matter to you and your morals and values, what's the rest of your life going to be like? And he said, you know, if this is going to be a deal breaker in a relationship, is this the kind of person you want to spend the rest of your life with? And I said to him, I don't understand. Why can't they all be like you and understanding? And he said, there's no right or wrong. That's their right. They have grown up surrounded by, you know, a strong Sikh family culture. They speak the language and the, you know, food and everything. They're a lot more versed in it. So he said that's their truth and that's what works for them. But he said it's just different for you. I found it quite difficult because I want to know what makes me more Sikh or more Gujarati. What does it matter whether I speak the language or not? I probably know a lot more about my Sikh heritage and culture than maybe a lot of those Punjabi people at university. So
it's sad, right?
It is. I think as you get older, I think you become less angry about it. It's no different to, I suppose, when we used to fight with our parents. You know, we're first gen. Their ways and their morals and their ways of thinking was different to us against the world. But there's a compromise as you grow older. And I think that's how I started to feel, where I was just like, that's, you know, it's a compromise. I don't want to get angry about it because you don't know any different.
No, but you can sort of forgive our parents, can't you? Because, you know, when we're first generation, so they've come over with their heritage. So they're just, in some effects, they're just living in this country, but they are still, you know, where they still see themselves and are themselves from where they are. They've just brought their heritage over with them.
I think they've got a much harder task, if I'm honest with you. You know, our parents, probably the same generation, came over like 60s and 70s, you know, and they want to retain their culture, but they don't want their children to feel isolated. And literally we were like the guinea pigs, right? Because we'd be like, no, we hate you. And like, no, we hate you, and this is our way of doing it. And it's kind of, it's difficult for them to go and speak to their parents as to how do I manage this, because
they've never been through it.
They have never been through that before. So I think they've had it quite hard, quite difficult.
Absolutely. But we've also, I think it's like the different struggles, isn't it? They've had it hard because obviously they're the ones that have come over here to set up a new life, obviously learning new language, learning a different culture. But to actually start living and sort of breathing the sort of British values, but still try and retain our heritage, I think definitely has been a massive struggle for me. And I think what's made it even harder is some of the conversations I'm having with my own children about being mixed, you know. And I'm starting to have those, you know, well, I'm half Indian, so this side, you know, like, and they're
you
sweet.
know what, I think the word half has always bugged me. I'd written this article specifically for the Asian Today called, like, you know, the half Sikh woman. And that's always bothered me, that, you know, I'm half this, I'm half that.
You're either one or the other.
I'm either one or the other.
Choose one.
Exactly. Yes, I've had a massive influence from my mum's side. I'm sure if my dad's family were here, there would have been more on his side. But neither my sisters and I, we've never felt left out. We've never felt isolated. We never felt like, oh, well, we don't know enough at all. But I just think it's quite ignorant for people to say. I think it's ignorant for people to use, especially language.
It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, language as a specification. Well, this is what makes you more culturally aware of this side of your background than the other side. And it's going to, I'm sure Maya must be asking questions now.
Well, she is, because I'm, you know, part of my sort of platform and part of my life is reconnecting with my culture, because, you know, there's a lot of my Indian culture that I was never brought up in. And actually there's a lot of me out there. It's just I'm not seeing anyone like me. So, you know, I was the first one to say, well, I don't speak my mother tongue, but does that make me less Asian?
No.
Do you know what I mean?
No.
I'm in an interracial relationship, but does that make me less Asian? Right?
I don't watch Indian cinema.
But does that make me less Asian?
Exactly.
Or is that just different? And I think some of what I'm trying to do, because I want to as well, and I think there's always I think sometimes with age, there comes a time where you think, you know what, I really want to know a lot more about where I'm from, my identity.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it through cooking at the moment. So I'm cooking, I'm teaching myself through people and books and everything like that about Indian food and the smells and the texture and the different spices that go with which, because the spice is a spice to me, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to educate with my daughter. I'm trying to like explain to her at the moment through food.
Yeah.
But I do want
come to your house.
Yeah, come to my house. Yeah, absolutely.
But coming over.
But I want to. What I'm sort of not concerned with, but what I've started sort of seeing is the fact that actually we're living in a very white neighbourhood. It's very, very white. It's not very multicultural, I don't think. And I've started to realise that actually...
Does that bother you?
I don't think it bothers me, but I'm trying to sort of make sure that it won't bother her, because I don't want her, when she's older, to say, I didn't know enough about my culture. And I think a lot of that is actually being with other people.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Learning about different cultures, but also learning about your own culture.
But being born here in the UK and being British has now become, this is part of our culture.
Yes,
it's
absolutely,
heritage.
absolutely.
Yes, we are of South Asian origin, but we are born here, educated here, lived here.
But we can't forget our heritage,
no, absolutely.
right?
And I think the difficulty is appearance as well. So here's another thing. People associate your appearance. So there's a big Hindu festival called Navratri. It happens, and as a child, me and my sisters have always gone, we get dressed up, and people have commented a couple of times, oh, you don't look Gujarati, you don't look Gujarati. And I'm like, well, what does Gujarati, what does it look like?
Yeah,
so, Sikhs who wear like turbans.
What does it mean to be British Asian in Gujarati?
Yeah. So you have clothing, attire, when people associate with, oh, you wear a turban, so you're Sikh. You cover your head, so you're Muslim and so forth, and Jewish with their kappa. But people do look at you and kind of think, oh, well, you don't look this, or you don't look that. And I think sometimes that throws you off a bit as well. Like, are you supposed to look a certain way? And I'm sure as Maya gets older as well, it might start to become a bit more like apparent as the skin tone changes as well. That you look in a certain way, and I think when people point that out, I think some people don't realise how damaging that can be, especially to a child. Yeah. Okay, well, where do I place you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think and that's it. And I think it's more to do with the fact that I think how we respond as well, because we can't be scared of these conversations, right?
No,
we can't worry about it. But what we need to do is actually be upfront and say, well, I don't know, or actually, I think it's very important that we do celebrate Diwali. You know, this is what I mean. I think living here as a first gen and having all these British values, because this is a Christian country and it is a white country, and then we need to, in some ways, respect that, and I think we do. But I think festivals and celebrations can be easily missed, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of us.
Yeah. I think having family influence around you makes a big difference. I don't think I would know half about my Indian culture if my mum's family weren't here. Yeah. Especially like I'm fluent in my mother tongue, but I think that's down to my mum's mum.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yes.
And people say like, oh, you speak Gujarati really well, and like, yes, my mum did teach me.
Yeah.
But like my grandmother literally like raised all of us, so we spoke it, and so people were like quite impressed, like, oh, you're really like you speak it really well. I don't think I would have been that fluent if I didn't have her influence. There's so much of my culture that I've been exposed to, and because we've got such a big family here on my mum's side, you automatically become entwined in it, and you learn more, and especially as you get older, I think you start to appreciate more, and you kind of hold on to and retain things that matter to you. And even if you don't fully believe it, but for me, it's the connection to the people that raised me. So I think that makes a huge difference, and it's something that I suppose on my dad's side I didn't really ever have, because
they weren't there.
Just weren't here, and that's to no fault. But every time we do go to India, like I say, we've always been like fully involved, and my dad's done what he can to teach us about the Sikh culture as well on this side. But I think definitely your surroundings make a big difference. So I get what you're saying. I suppose if you are in an area where there aren't enough, South Asian communities around you, that's where it starts to become difficult.
But aren't we seeing a change though, aren't we? We're seeing a lot more people not living with their in-laws, a lot more people not living with their families, a lot more people bringing their children up on their own, away from families, because obviously we know the other side to having a lot of family around as well. So I think there is a change as well. I don't think we're getting a lot more of that sort of family community. No,
the dynamics of the family is changing, right? Because it's no longer slowly, as it started filtering through. Like my parents' generation, at their age, their parents were at home, and like my parents in their 70s, like still working like mad. They've got their own social lives. Their parents were like that. So as the generation changes, the joint families and so forth become like less and less, and they become a little bit more independent. People are speaking out more as well. Women are also financially independent, so they can break free from toxic relationships. There's a lot more, opportunities available for people to go out and find parts of their community that they relate to. I think social media has definitely helped in that sense. Facebook groups and so forth, that people are looking for recommendations. People are now, I feel, are going out there and seeking, what more can I learn about my culture? Where can I find this, guys?
They're really interested.
Yeah, they are interested.
Whereas I think when I was growing up, I really wasn't interested, because obviously I was the first generation, and the racism, and it was actually not a good thing to be a person of colour, right? Because you didn't get the opportunities, the racist remarks, there was an acceptance issue that, so it's really, really like, it's changed now, and I think sometimes it's us sort of changing with it. So me going from, obviously I've had to, in some respects, I think growing up I had to reject my culture to fit in, right? To be accepted and to have the opportunities that I had to fight for, but to be in the place where there is an opportunity. And now
that's interesting, because I literally had, like, I suppose, the opposite, because it was always drummed in me. But I think as I got older, I kind of chose to, pick, I suppose, what I could relate to. So I suppose my question to you is, as Maya gets older and when the next generation comes along, is there a fear of maybe what we've learned and what we've retained does eventually get sieved through?
Oh, I did an article for a platform, and basically it was about mother tongue. So I am the oldest. No, I'm not the oldest. I'm the third oldest, and my oldest two cousins, they know Punjabi absolutely fluently. But then from there's someone else, and then there's me. It's lost. So after me, no one can speak, and I've got so many cousins. I think there's about 15 of us or something. But it's gone,
scary.
And it's gone. And when I was studying language, culture is embedded within language. So because I know my mother tongue, but it's really weird because actually my mother is one of 7. They speak it fluently. And for some reason that hasn't been filtered through and been taught, because I think it's easier. Maybe we don't need it. I don't actually know the reason, because when you challenge it, and when I say challenge, it's not in an aggressive way, but ask the question, why didn't you teach me? It's a very, very touchy subject. It's very sensitive, because I think there's a shame in it as well, that and it's not just me. It's not just me. I think when I've been speaking to people about my platform, a lot of them go, I don't know my mother tongue, and I'm Muslim, or I am, Sikh as well.
Does that make you less Punjabi though?
But it doesn't make you less, but I think there is a lot of heritage that has been missed from it. So really, like, that's the sort of challenge, I think. But how do we move forward, Sage, do you think?
I think, from the language perspective, as much as possible, you keep, you have children, so as much as you can keep talking, within the house, keep that up. I think that there are, platforms available where you can even learn it online. It was very different from when we were children. You know, my mum told me that she had taken us to this community school so that my sisters and I could learn to read and write Gujarati.
Yeah.
And they said no because of my dad's surname.
You're right,
which is just insane. You want to learn the language.
Yeah.
Obviously nowadays it's completely different. You know, they are embracing people wanting to learn like their language, and you can learn at GCSEs and so forth. So I think that language is important as well, especially, you know, if we do go back to India and you want to converse with people who maybe can't speak English, and it's part of who you are. So I think we should, as much as possible, keep encouraging like the language, and things like what you're doing as well, like with the cooking and everything. I, especially during lockdown and stuff, there were so many Facebook groups, and I was like, oh, I could learn to make this, I could learn to make that, you know. And somewhere along the line, I think that there's no guarantee that whatever our parents taught us, it's going to be. It's like my grandmother might have taught my mum a dish, right? Yeah. And so she tries to make it like her mum will, to the best of her ability. But she knows it'll probably never be as good as her. Everything I learned from cooking-wise, I learned from my mum. Yeah. And I try my hardest to make sure it's as good as my mum's, right? But I know it will never be. And maybe like when I have my daughters as well, it'll be like the same. So as much as possible, try and like, you know, like retain that. I've got like a notebook where I try and like all the basic recipes that my mum taught me when I was a teenager. Yeah, I write them all down. Yeah, I've got it in my books. I never forget like the basics, you know.
And having these open conversations, right? And actually just being honest about it, on how you're feeling and actually what you want to learn from it and stuff. Yeah,
definitely. I think it kind of changes as you get older. I think when culture or when your upbringing and your heritage is almost, I don't want to use enforced. I think enforced is quite a negative word, but when it's with you by default, and you've got no other choice, you know, there are times that you do want to kind of shake it off. Yeah. You know, like I'm my own person. But actually when you get older, you start discovering yourself a little bit more, like what matters to you. And I've had conversations with my mum about like, you know, weddings and stuff. And I said, there are certain rituals that I don't really believe in. And these are my reasons, like why I wouldn't want to do such and such. But her take on it would be different. Yeah. It would be like, well, traditionally, this is why it was done. So we have different interpretations. Yeah. So I think what will happen is that we'll start to maybe bring our own interpretations as the next generation. And I don't think that's a bad thing. No. You know, it's our ways of trying to.
But it's identity, right? It's your identity. It's not your mum's identity. And it's going to be different because you've been brought up differently. Yeah. Well, Sage, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and please come on again.
I will do. Thank you.